circular economy, and in particular with a focus on buildings. So I would like to invite Joe Da Silva, Global Director for Sustainable Development at Arup, on the stage, who's going to help to introduce her panel. And just to put into context, we all know the circular economy is not just another topic. It is absolutely critical to helping support climate mitigation. So why are we talking about buildings? Well, very simply, the built environment makes up 40% of global resource use and 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And so no better speaker to have with us and with our panelists to understand more about that, turning words into actions, as Salvador said. So
thank you.
Please.
Thank you. I'm going to go and sit down over here so I don't drop everything. I'm delighted to be here, and even more delighted to find that circular economy is on the agenda for this discussion. We look forward, all of us, I think, to a world where 9 billion people can live well and live within the boundaries of our planet. At Arup, we have a strategy which puts sustainable development at the heart of everything we do, which means that we have to think about people and the planet in all the business decisions that we're making. But we're only going to get to this future, a sustainable future, if we focus on meeting the needs of everyone and use resources very differently to how we do today. We only have one planet's worth of resources, and key resources are running out, whether those are metals or sand suitable for construction, and we know that our planet is also sick in terms of biodiversity. WRI a few years ago put together an excellent report called The Elephant in the Boardroom. It was a big wake-up call. It was a wake-up call to business to realize that most of our businesses thrive and survive because we use resources. And if we're going to get to a sustainable future, we need to decouple economic growth from consumption. And really that's what the circular economy is all about. Essentially, our challenge collectively is to break the linear cycle of take, make, and dispose that we're all used to. This pen that I'm holding in my hand is created from materials that were extracted, manufactured, transported, and when I've finished using it, I will probably have no option but to throw it away. That doesn't make sense, and certainly isn't the direction we all want to go on. So our challenge is to break this cycle and create an economy that is regenerative by design, to retain the value of resources, products, parts, and materials by creating new and innovative business models that allow for long life, optimal reuse, renewability, and recycling, and a sharing economy where we own less and pool resources. This transition is transformational, and I was delighted to see that word transformational in the name of this session. This is not about incremental change. This is about radical change in the way we think and therefore the way we act. It's crucial to achieving net zero by 2050. The resources we use are responsible for an enormous amount of emissions. In the sector I work in, which is the built environment, the built environment is responsible for around 40% of emissions. 11% of that is the materials locked up in buildings, and IEA estimate there's a further 10% locked up in the infrastructure that supports buildings. So we're not going to get to net zero by 2050 unless we address the circular economy question. We just need to change our attitude and view our planet as a precious materials repository, reverse the damage we've done to date, and create new business models that will create new job opportunities. I'm therefore really delighted that today we've got a panel that is representative of the breadth of that opportunity. And I'd like the following to join me on stage. Benoit Bazin, who's the CEO of Saint-Gobain, who are one of the biggest material suppliers in the world. We have Andreas Berger, the CEO of Corporate Solutions, who I believe is joining us virtually, and I'm hoping someone at the back of the room will magically enable that to happen. Hello, Andreas. You're with us live at COP.
Here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Welcome. And Ulrich Schaaf, who is the CEO of Skills Lab. And then finally, Caroline Carrera from Mercado Circular, who I think is also joining us in person. Hello, welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Benoit, we've spoken on virtual forums before, so it's very nice to have Saint-Gobain here in person. As a company, what you do is supply materials. Please, can you sort of share with us, because I know that you're doing a lot in this area, what the priorities for Saint-Gobain are and what you see as the business opportunities behind the circular economy?
To set the scene, I think you were very clear that the buildings, they make 40% of the world emissions. So working on the buildings is in itself something which will provide a strong positive impact for the planet. Second, we have to have 2 billion more population in the big cities in emerging markets in the next 30 years. So we need to have the right solution for that. I think there are many, many ways to do that within the construction sector. First, new ways of construction. We are moving away from the heavy traditional way of construction with heavy building materials towards what I call light construction, where you can save 50% of the weight of materials. You save on the transport, you save on the CO2 that has been used to produce the material. So moving to new way of construction, basically working on pillars of steel, of timber, but all the rest is made of glass, of plasterboard, of cladding, insulation, etc. So new way of construction is clearly one important factor. The second one is that on some of the products I mentioned, they are very good for the circular economy. Glass can be recycled 100%. Glass wool insulation can be recycled 100%. Same for plaster or plasterboard. So those materials are good for recycling. Now the difficulty is that we need to get organized in the circular economy. And we need to organize, we need to take the lead. The vision of Saint-Gobain is to be the worldwide leader in light and sustainable construction. So we have to set the tone and be the reference in how to organize a very fragmented value chain. Working with the architects upfront, because the sooner you design the building, the better it will be along all the value chain in terms of speed of construction, in terms of cost, and in terms of impact, of course, on the planet. Down to the craftsmen, to train thousands of them. We train a lot of them in our networks of distribution across Europe. And of course, recycle and collect the waste. We have 130 waste collection points just in France to collect the demolition waste. So I think organizing the value chain of all the different actors in the supply chain of construction is of the essence. We are not yet there, but we are moving in the right direction. And clearly also measuring and convincing all the actors about the impact, the positive impact of circular economy. You can save on the land by reusing the land of an existing building rather than pay something extra for new land. You can, of course, save on the cost of landfilling, which could be extremely costly, and the governments can push up the cost to accelerate the transition to circular economy. And third, you can value the bank of materials that do exist in a building. So there is a hidden value, I would say, in a building, and we need to value that. We need to measure it. So we at Saint-Gobain, we have worked on solutions on how to measure the impact, not only how much CO2 we use to manufacture the materials on our way to carbon neutrality by 2050, but also what is the impact that our solution provide in terms of minimizing the CO2 in any building using, of course, circular economy. So a lot of optimism, I would say, on my side, because we can recycle 100% raw materials for buildings. We have the way to organize the value chain. And I think it's true in Western economies, but also in emerging markets. So it's moving fast.
Thank you, Benoit. And I share your view that the construction industry is one of the most wasteful. It's one of the most fragmented. Seeing these problems and addressing them head on, we're coming up with new solutions. And I think the digital economy is facilitating that also. Carolina, could I switch to you? Your company, I think, is based in Latin America, and you focus not on construction but on products. where it's a different supply chain, it's a different set of actors. Would you share with us, your company is based around circular principles. That's the foundation of what you're doing. Could you share with us what inspired you to take that journey and the opportunities that are arising?
Well, first of all, thank you, and we're honored to be here. We come from Chile, and our company, it's called Ecocarga. It's a franchise of refill stations for home care products. So we offer consumers quality products that are environmentally friendly, but most importantly, that are 50% cheaper than a regular home care product offered in a supermarket. And the way that this is done is because we intervene, as you said, the value chain creation of those particular products using the principles of circular economy, by minimizing the cost on logistics and transportation, and by also taking out all the secondary packaging, we are able to lower the cost dramatically, as you can see, and that saving is given to consumer. So the company only has 3 years, but we're very big right now and plans to grow across Latin America. And the main factors why this is working so well are 3 things, very basic. The first one has to do with the value. So the value proposition that we give consumers is attracting a massive amount of consumers versus the regular eco-friendly products. So 80% of Ecocarga current consumers are coming to the stores without really knowing that we offer a reuse system. They come because it is cheap, and that is driving a new habit for them. So consumers are adapting, as some of the speakers before said. You can change consumers' habit if you give them the right incentive. And that is our first pillar of our model, giving them the right incentives. On top of that, evidently, by inviting consumers to reuse the container, because the way it works is that on the first purchase, you buy a package, and the second, the third, the fourth purchase, you only pay for the liquid, for the refill. 70% of the consumers that we have stay in the model at least a year. Each consumer, in average, saves 24 bottles per year. So an average store of Ecocarga saves 10 tons of plastic in a year. So the individual behavior is truly becoming a big effort that can be accounted, that can be tracked. And behind that, how do we know this? Because we put a QR code in all of our packaging, and that way we have the traceability, not only for safety reasons for consumers of the products that they are acquiring, but also we can understand the consumer's behavior and how the bottles are coming back to the system. And the third one, and probably most important one, since we were talking also about the importance of including people, we decided to make this business a franchise business so that we could invite the consumers that we have. By the way, out of the franchisees that we have, half of them were previous customers of Ecocarga that decided and wanted to open a store. So we invite these consumers, and what happens is that most of them is their first business. So it's truly an entrepreneur way of including consumers. And evidently for us, it's really good because we gain coverage very fast. But who will speak better of your product than someone that started to use you first? So those are the main things why we're working, our work in Ecocarga is going really well.
It's wonderful to hear, and wonderful to hear such a people-centered approach. I want to move on to Ulrich, because we've talked, circular economy, people think about the materials that have been used, they think about different business models, different way of designing in order to move to a circular economy. But of course, that also creates an awful lot of new job opportunities. Will you share with us what Skills Lab are doing in this area?
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. So, as you said, the good news is that this transition will create a lot of jobs. jobs with value, jobs that are in different communities. And I think that is just generally something everybody can get behind. Now, the challenge with this transition is that, number one, we want to change kind of how everybody does their job. And we're talking here about 9 billion people. So that's an enormous reskilling effort across the supply chain. And the other challenge is that a lot of the brown jobs, a lot of the environmentally unfriendly jobs are regionally very concentrated. They're also concentrated in certain communities. And it's absolutely essential that we make sure that in this new circular economy, everyone has a pathway to employment. So that's the so-called just transition. And so we're SkillUp, and our core approach here is that we completely focus on skills. We want to understand what are the skills that are required in these new jobs that we are currently creating. What are the skills that are currently used in brown jobs that we want to get rid of? And ultimately, the skills lens will allow us to inform employment services and education and training providers to really help to transition this workforce to this new reality. And so at this COP event, together with the UN high-level champions for climate action and a couple of other stakeholders, we're launching now a Skills Hub. And this Skills Hub has a very simple objective, and that is that we want to create detailed skill profiles and data sets of all of the people that are already working in these new jobs. So we're going to survey the workers that are already in this circular economy and understand in detail what are they doing between 9 and 5. We're also going to do the same thing with people that are currently working in brown industries that need to be transitioned out of them and reutilize their skill set in new jobs. And the result of this will be a worker-generated empirical data set that allows us to understand of basically how to get from A to B, what is the training and education we need to provide in order to reskill people, what are the the employment service, career service pathways we can provide to affected workers, with the end result that this becomes a just and social transition. So we're looking currently for partners, right? Like this is a very early stage. So if you care about this topic, if you employ people in a new circular economy, if you employ people that are currently in brown jobs, if you're an education provider, if you think of this on a policy level, on a research level, and you're interested in this kind of data, please reach out to us. So we're putting together a coalition around this, and in the next weeks we'll formalize this and then very soon publish the first data sets around this work.
Thank you, Ulrich. I want to move onto the screen. Andreas, you have beamed in to COP. I was intrigued to learn from you what Swiss Re are doing in terms of the circular economy. As a financial organization, as an insurance organization, how does the circular economy impact your business?
Yeah, first of all, we are probably one of the largest reinsurance groups in the world. And we never talk about insurance in this context. We talk about resilience, and that's exactly the theme here. That's part of our purpose. We say we make the world more resilient. So in that sense, we're obviously also supporting the construction transformation, to support innovation in the ways to reuse construction waste. Now, you might ask yourself how you're going to do this. So we spend a lot of time, resources into research and development. We're teaming up with academia, university institutions in order to really understand the material, the durability or the solidity of the new materials that are being created in this whole circular economy. And then you might ask yourself, but what are you doing about this? So we look at exposures that companies have, in using those reused construction waste, for instance. But we also look at the process itself, of the reusing circular economy. Now, how do we bring this to the customer base, basically, to the world? That is a new approach that we're testing now. We're including data and technology here. because the main issue is not the insurance element. First of all, we need to start to understand the exposure, the risk, and that starts really at the source where the companies deal with those materials. And here we try to bring our risk insights, the analytics that we created through also the research and development part, we try to bring that closer to the customer base. And therefore we use the data and technology side where our customer can ingest their data and then we enrich it really with our analytics tools. To give you an example, if you look at, and we were talking about, Benoit was talking about the logistics and also the supply chain element, and here you can very, very quickly see the disruption that can happen, also to look at the quality of material. And here we basically built a digital twin of your supply chain as a corporate, as a construction company, for instance. And then we use the events and then we stress test this supply chain, and then we bring actionable insights back into the company to enrich the scenario planning. And then you might then say, okay, now it's about risk financing, and insurance is then one element to it, and that's where we bring our balance sheets to the party. And the last thing I wanted to say, as an insurance company and reinsurance group, one of our big asset classes is real estate, and we have own buildings here, and we are builder owner here. And our strategy is to fully commit, obviously, with the entire business to the net zero by 2050. And this circular component is even seen here as we build, and I'm looking out the window here as I look at the lake, the Zurich Lake, and we have a full construction site here next to our main building. And as we were basically demolishing the old building, we're now building the new one. And in this whole process, we were obviously bringing in experts, specialist companies to basically, after the building has been cleared, to gut basically everything. And that obviously needs to be reused, and 62% of, and I read it up here, 68 tons, that were removed are being reused now. So that's a very concrete daily application of it, where we can contribute to it by being a builder owner ourselves. This beyond also the reinsurance element that I described before.
Thank you, Andreas. And I think it's wonderful to hear that as a firm you're thinking about what you can do just as a business because of the buildings you own and occupy, the goods and services that you use, as well as what you do through your core business. We work very closely with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who are championing the circular economy. I recommend to all of you their tool, their circularity tool, which gives you an opportunity to analyze your company, to question the circularity of your company. We did it for Arup last year. It was a wake-up call in terms of many of our own kind of corporate practices, and has made us to look at ourselves differently. I wanted to talk about the enabling environment to enable this business transition. We always talk about, us businesses, operate in an environment. We're waiting for policy signals from government. We're waiting for the financiers to do their bit. We're waiting for regulations and legislation. Benoit, your company sits in Europe. We're seeing at Arup that there is definitely, Europe is leading the way because of the EU taxonomy in terms of creating a new policy environment. And I wondered if you could sort of share with people here from other regions a bit more about the EU taxonomy, what it is and how it's changing the business environment for you.
Sure. And I think I encourage also all of you to read. There is a very interesting report done by the WBCSD on circular economy. So a very good study, which is good for all of us as a leading example. The EU taxonomy is a good framework. On our side, within Saint-Gobain, we go even one step further, because it's not only good to measure the amount of products which are good for the planet, and we measure that 72% of our products around the world, so not only in Europe, are sustainable, with a significant positive impact for the well-being of the inhabitants or the planet. But it's also very important to go one step further in terms of measuring the impact you provide to the customers, to the buildings, as we have heard from Andreas at Swiss Re. So not only within our portfolio, what it means, but what it means when it is installed in the final buildings. And that's very important to measure that. We do that around the world. So having a framework is always extremely useful. We have been working also on the environmental product declaration. It started in Europe, but now we do that for 1,500 product families around the world. And it's very helpful. And you know, when you built the Google headquarters in India, we have participated in that. They ask for it because they come from the US, they come on a worldwide scope, and it's very important to set the tone. So measurement is always extremely important, whether the taxonomy, whether the life cycle analysis or EPDs. And I think one point we should not forget about in terms of push towards circular economy is the training, the education. It's very important that we educate the craftsmen who built the buildings, if I stay on my sector, in the construction sector. So education, of course, of the end users, education of the craftsmen on how to recycle when they demolish a building. We need to have 7 different big bags at the job site for PVC, for aluminum, for glass, for plasterboard. And that education is extremely important, can be pushed also and helped by the government. And the final point I would make on circular economy is that the cost of landfilling has been raised a lot in Europe, even prohibiting landfilling, which is good. And I would encourage all the governments around the world to push for higher cost of landfilling in order to accelerate the transition towards circular economy. So I think there is a framework that the governments, whether on taxonomy, whether on cost or prohibition of landfilling, can provide in order to raise the standard for circular economy and, of course, the standard for the buildings themselves.
And are those kinds of changes really shifting the business model in making circular buildings and more lightweight construction, industrialized construction, cheaper? As Carolina pointed out, you know, her business model is based on a circular business model, which is just cheaper, it's more affordable, and, you know, therefore she's thriving. Is the same true in terms of the shift in the construction industry?
It is moving fast in terms of requirement of recycled materials. We have plants in the Nordic countries where we recycle 30% of gypsum into plasterboard. We recycle 75% of our glass wool insulation. So it's moving fast. And the proof of the concept, I would say, in the construction sector is that if you align early on all the actors, you don't raise the cost because you move to carbon neutrality. You don't raise the cost because you move to circular economy. But you have to align all the actors a bit earlier than in traditional ways of construction so that everyone knows how to work together, everyone knows what products to use, how to demolish and recycle the waste. So I think the task for all of us is to truly embark, and we want to set the tone and lead as a leader in the sector. But clearly when you align all that, it's not a question of cost, it's a question of efficiency, and everyone can be convinced. So I'm resolutely optimistic about the trend going forward for the construction sector.
No, that's excellent. Carolina, do you share that optimism? I mean, you're working in home care projects. It's a very different end of the spectrum. The sectors that have been flagged as key industry sectors that we have to tackle include at one end of the spectrum steel and aluminium, and at the other, you know, fashion and, you know, goods that we use at home. Do you think that you are a pioneer that is out there well in front of the wave, or do you see industry generally moving towards more circular business models?
Well, we see the following. We see that when we talk to different partners in different industries, there is the interest on understanding what circular economy is, and it clicks when they see how consumers are approaching it once you give them the right incentive. But what is missing for most of the companies to jump in, it's the clarity of the rules of the game. So, for example, in the industry that we're currently working on, not necessarily across Latin America, there's policies and regulations that allows to reuse, that allows the place to create reuse models. And even in the countries like Chile, where we can sell home care cleaning products, but for example, cosmetic industry, it's forbidden. So what we really need is the policies and the regulations to be clear. So once the rules of the games are clear, I believe that companies and private investment is going to jump in. Because the other thing that we're doing right now as being pioneers is showing the way that this is good business. You could do sustainable business can be good for everyone, for consumers because it's cheaper, for people because you're creating new jobs, and also for the environment. So that is truly what we're doing right now. What we need is more clarity on the rules, and I think that this will follow.
Thank you. I'm looking at the clock in front of me, ticking down. We've had a discussion that's gone extremely fast, and the time's running out. I've got about 30 seconds left. I wanted to give the last word to ask Andreas what do you see the opportunity for the finance community to enable the circular economy to really take off over the next 5 years, so that we're sitting at COP in COP31, and what's the presentation you'd like to be giving at COP21, celebrating what the finance community has done to really enable the circular economy to move to progress?
Yeah, so very quickly, the big topic here is actually to transition from where we are today in order to go where we want to be, and also fuel that circle that you're talking about. So our contribution here can be significant. We are being asked by many companies to accompany that transition process. So and I think it's so complex. It's not one size fits all, so we have to deploy many resources. We have to make it measurable. Benoit was mentioning it again, and then really commit ourselves to that journey. This is the big and heavy lifting. I would encourage us also to extensively be bold and encourage everybody to use the data and technology side, because without that, I think the heavy lifting won't be possible. We were talking about efficiencies, we were talking about accuracy and integrity also of data that we use. If we want to make it happen, I think transition management and transition risk, the management risk of the transition risk is important. Equally then the data and technology embracement from our end. So that's where we can contribute.
Thank you, Andreas. I'd like to just end by thanking the panel very much, and thank you to the Marrakesh Partnerships for really putting this on the agenda. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists. So you've got a minute for a bit of a stretch, and I'd like to invite Anthony from the Mission Possible Partnership onto the stage, together with your speakers. So the topic now is thinking about not what hard to abate sectors are, but actually the reality is these are need to abate sectors. So we need this mind shift in order to understand it's possible. And Anthony has got some speakers